Hey everyone, it's Steve,
And Tiffany.
Different Chick Farm and Orchard. We are here today doing one of our favorite things to do this time of year. We'll pan you around here in a minute and show you what we're working on, what we're doing. We're preparing for one of our biggest selling items on the farm. One of the largest things that we move the most of. And probably is our number two, isn't it?
Yeah.
For some people, this may be their number one, but we're a little bit different. So, what we're talking about today is tomatoes. We're talking about growing those amazing, juicy, plump, delicious tomatoes. Now, these are our greenhouse ones. It would be a little bit early to have our outside tomatoes already ready to go up to their bigger pots.
Because it's January 29th.
Yes.
Zone 7, that would not.
Be bad idea, yeah. Bad idea. So, let's take a look what we got here, and we'll show you what we're doing. We'll get Tiffany to get one of our trays and to get a couple of pots and put soil in them. And I'm going to show you what we're doing. So here is one of my trays. Now we're experimenting this year. These are not our normal greenhouse tomatoes that we grow. We are growing a few of our greenhouse tomatoes. These particular ones actually will go in our farmer's friend. Excuse the mess. We are seeding and working. Just part of it. Okay, well the tea has got nothing to do with seeding, but that's probably good for the working. So
it keeps the workers happy.
These little guys are 13 days old from the day that I seeded them. Now that means they had to germinate. They had to grow. Most of these have their second set of leaves, and I saw a couple that are starting their first set of true leaves. These big ones are the leaves they come out with. These will fall off later. These are your true leaves right here. So, and we got some that's getting big enough to start putting out their second set. Like right there. So, now these are plug trays. These are a 128 cell tray. And we're going to up pot these. Sorry about that focus, guys. It did not decide to autofocus for us. We're going to up pot these into some bigger pots. So we have an Abe Lincoln, old heirloom, an orange accordion from Baker Creek from Rare Seeds. The Abe Lincoln was from Southern Exposure. We have a pink jazz from Rare Seeds. The jazz tomatoes we've had some issues with. They diseased early. So we're going to try growing this in the tunnel to see if we can control enough water and splash to control the disease. Large barred boar, one of my favorite tomatoes. And Amana orange. We had bad germination on our Amana orange seeds. Now these are a few years old, so it could be, when I say a few, I mean several years old. These are probably 5, 6, maybe even 7 years old. So we got to save seeds this year because I was planning on planting more like 20 of these. And so we're cutting that back, and I'm going to, large barred boars germinated well, so we'll grow less of these and more of these. We'll miss them, but we got to do what we got to do. Maybe a few of these find their way into the field. These do good in the field also. So we may end up a few of these in the field. But these are to get us an early start. Now, Tiffany is over here working with our Pro Mix MP. And I've already slightly wetted this, so it's got a little bit of moisture to it. And so she's getting us some pots here in a tray. Now, normally for our field tomatoes, these would be either left in a 50 cell tray, and we'd direct plant from that, or we would have them in a 2.5 inch pot. But these are going in our greenhouse, so we're going with the larger pot. And is that a 3.5 Tiff? Is that what those are?
3.5.
So we're going in a 3.5 inch pot. That way they can grow in there longer. Now, technically, if you want to be technical, you could up pot these twice. Once into a little bit bigger pot and then once into the bigger one. We're not doing that. We'll have too much going on when that time comes around, and it ain't going to happen. So we're going to go ahead and go to the larger pot now, and we're going to sink these all the way, and I'll show you. So I'll take my finger, and I'll put a hole right in the middle. So let's start with our large barred bore. And I will sink these all the way up to the leaves. I mean completely, teetotally up to the leaves. Now, what will happen with a tomato is it will root all along where it makes contact with that soil. That stem will throw out more roots. This will give us a nice, hardy, healthy plant that will produce, hopefully, a real nice root system. And we'll put a little fertilizer on this, and then we'll fertilize with a liquid. So the fertilizer we're using for this is an organic, and this is approved, and it's Harmony Products. The other side tells us what it is. So it's a pretty balanced fertilizer. We're working with a 5-4-3. So we got 5% nitrogen, as you can see, and 4% phosphate, and 3% soluble potash. Now you'll also see it's got 9% calcium, which of course is great for tomatoes and peppers. And this is derived from poultry manure, so the base of this is going to be from turkeys and chickens and and the Armory certified label. And they've got your, if you want to use it in your landscape, they got your how to use it there for your yard. They tell you about your coverage, and then they tell you how to use it on your vegetable plants. Now, this doesn't tell you how to use it on these little small plants, but it literally will just put a sprinkle up there. So, Tiff,
Yes.
quick question. What is your favorite heirloom tomato?
I have two. I can't decide between both. So hillbilly potato leaf
Okay.
and a mono orange.
Okay. What's your favorite greenhouse tomato?
Tomato, cherry tomato, does it matter?
Yep.
Okay.
Regular slicing tomato.
Regular slicing. That is going to be Gin Fizz.
So why is Gin Fizz your favorite?
So Gin Fizz is like the hillbilly potato leaf, whereas it is a orange-based multicolored tomato. So it has that really good, not really acidic, just a little acidic flavor to it.
So your three tomatoes you picked there are all a orange-based tomato.
I am not a red-based
So
tomato.
you are an orange tomato girl.
Yeah. You know what red tomatoes are good for? Tomato sauce.
See, now I have to differ with her. I do love the Amana orange. I love hillbilly potato leaf. I love Big Rainbow. I love the striped German. All of those tomatoes are amazing. Thornburn's terracotta. Oh gosh, there's so many. Dr. Weechee's yellow. Great tomatoes. I like them all. I am a tomato fanatic. I've got gout, and so there's a lot of things I can't eat. Thankfully, tomatoes is not on that list. It would be horrible to not be able to eat my lovely, wonderful, amazing tomatoes. I like pink ones, like German Johnson. I like your classic red beefsteak. I like red brandy wine. Now, I do got a favorite. My favorite is Cherokee Purple and Carbon. Now, I say that with this disclaimer. If I hadn't have found Cherokee Purple first, Black Creme might be my favorite. I think Black Creme tastes 10% or 20% better than Cherokee Purple. But I fell in love with Cherokee Purple. It was the first tomato I fell in love with. And it's hard to get over your first love. Let me just tell you, it's tough. But I like them all. Probably my least favorite are yellow. If I had to choose one that is not my favorite, I even like green better than yellow. The green tomato has such a great tang to it, especially your striped ones like Berkeley tie-dye green. Oof. Or the pink Berkeley tie-dye that has green stripes in the pink one. Great tomatoes. Wonderful on BLTs. So, all right. So, enough of that. We're going to get back to showing you a few things here. We're going to do a little up potting. We'll bring you back and show you some progress. Talk to you about some tomato tips and tricks. All right, guys. Now it's time for the tips and tricks. Promised it to you, so now we're going to deliver. So, no particular order on these. It's just the order I happen to write them down because they came to me. These are the things that I look for and that you should be looking for, in my opinion. So, let's talk about germination temperature for your seeds. If you're growing from seeds, this is information you need to know to have a consistent, full germination. Now, you can get by with a lot more than this, but if we're talking ideal, so germination temperature is 75 to 85 degrees. Now, if you've got a really nice warm window, obviously make sure it's not too hot, depending on where you live. You can probably pull off 75 to 80 degrees. So you can probably germinate your tomatoes that way. Another way to germinate your tomatoes without a heat mat is by using an overhead light. Now, LEDs, keep in mind, do not put off as much heat, virtually none in most cases, as your old aquarium lights, what they call T12s, or even the T8s, or the so forth that we have used for years in greenhouses and so forth. Shop lights that you used in garages or workshops or in your basement. Those put off more heat to the point that you got to watch your spacing, because if you get them too close, you can scorch those new seedlings when they come up. So you want to measure that heat and be careful with the intensity. But you can pull that heat off for that germination temperature just by lights. Now, it's also real easy nowadays, since we have modern technology of LED lights, to use LEDs. They're quite affordable. I've got a video, if I remember, I'll link this at the end. It'll be up here in that side or this side. And I've got a video on how we lay out our budget grow shelf for our seed germination room. And these work excellent. So I'll put that up there, show you what we've got. And that way, if you like it, you can build one for yourself. But anyway, 75 to 85 degrees, and keep the moisture moderately moist. So by moderately moist, what we're driving at is you don't want it to stay soaking wet, but you don't want it to be dry either. So you're looking to keep the soil wet, but not barely moist, if that makes sense. So, number 2. Now, most of these are going to apply to once they germinate. So I've done showed you, so we won't include that in our tips and tricks. I've done showed you how to sink the plant deep in the soil pot when you transplant from the seedling tray to the bigger pot that you're going to use to grow them up in to get them to the size that you're going to put them in your garden. So that's all in what you're looking for and how long you're going to grow these plants and how big. You really don't want to get them too huge. A foot tall is plenty big enough, and usually 6 to 8 inches is exceptional size to put out in your garden. So that's what we're going to be talking about mainly, is after the germination. So we want to have them under light immediately when they germinate so that they don't get leggy. And I can show you a great example of leggy because I happen to have a tray here in front of me that got out of control. Now what happened on these, you see how that one's curled even over the side? What happened on these is I left them in our germination chamber too long. Our germination chamber does not have a light. It works great for peppers and other things, and it works good for tomatoes as long as I remember to check them twice a day, and I did not. So I lost a few, but most of these will be salvageable. I'll do just what I showed you in the other pot. I'll sink these real deep into that soil, and that will allow them to continue to produce more roots and grow. Now, if this was a cheap seed, I might just start over because I got plenty of time, but these are expensive greenhouse tomatoes that I flubbed up on, so we're going to try to recover them. All right, so our number 2 is test and amend your soil. Now, I preach this to you, but it's not something that we do on a regular basis. I only do this if I see a problem. We amend our soil every year where we plant. So by amending, we're going to put fertilizer in the ground at time of planting, and we till in like a composted cow manure or chicken manure or something like that gets tilled into the soil where the tomatoes are going to go every year. And that's the same thing with our peppers. We amend the soil every year. So that's my recommendation. Now, if you see a problem, definitely test. So we want to fertilize. Now, when we fertilize, we want to use a quality organic fertilizer. You can use a chemical fertilizer, that's your choice, but a quality organic fertilizer helps to feed your soil and continue to build it and repair it if used properly. So we start with a quality organic fertilizer. Now, we have been using up to this point, and I may change this year. I don't know for sure. The fertilizer I was showing you here, the earlier in the video, that may be what we use this year. It's been recommended to us by another grower who grows similar to the way we grow, and they say that's all they use. Up to this point, I have used Espoma tomato tone for all my tomatoes, and it works great. So Espoma may be easy for you to get a hold of, and it is organic, and it is an amazing product. So that was number 3. Number 4, water consistently and thoroughly. Your tomatoes do not like to be watered inconsistently once they set fruit, and especially once that fruit starts to get to size. If you neglect and don't water your tomatoes and let them dry out and then try to water them a lot the next day or the next day, you can cause your tomatoes to split. They will grow bigger, get a larger tomato if they continue to grow consistently, which means consistent watering of your tomatoes. And you want to water thoroughly when you do. You don't want to just be watering the top inch, 2 or 3 inches of soil. Get you down there a good 6-8 inches of watering into the soil for your tomatoes. That'll help them roots to grow down deeper and deeper and deeper. And that way they become more drought tolerant. Now, my next tip is going to contradict part of what I just told you, but I'll explain. So for number 5, I'm going to say plant extra deep. So when that tomato comes out of this pot and is ready to go into the ground in my greenhouse, normally you would just plant it the depth of the root ball for most things. Tomatoes will benefit greatly by being planted deeper in the ground. There's only one downside to that, other than the extra work. The only downside to that is that those roots end up farther down in the ground at the beginning of the season where it's colder, and that could slow down that first of the season growth, but it will pay off later in the season by being able to have a larger root system to grow off of that stem and produce much more nutrients up out of the soil and into your tomatoes, which will, under most studies, tell you that'll give you a hardier, healthier plant and a better tasting tomato. So keep that in mind. That's what we do. So that's why it contradicts what I told you about watering only around 6 to 8 inches. So if you plant this tomato 18 inches in the ground, you're going to need to water thoroughly down to around 12 inches. So you want to make sure to get it good and saturated. We use a drip irrigation, which works really, really, really well for us, and helps to keep the soil consistent and watered. Okay, number 6, remove any dead or damaged leaves or limbs from your plant. Don't give bugs and insects and disease a place to hold on. Remove it. Prune it off. Get you a sharp pocket knife. Use a pair of pruners. You can get a pair of pruners at your local hardware or garden store, or order them off Amazon, or just use a pocket knife. Now, I usually don't use this one. I've got a smaller pocket knife. Matter of fact, this is one that ends up in my tomato greenhouse most of the time. Just a little case pocket knife. I keep it nice and sharp and just prune off what I don't want. Sometimes you can snap them off, but keep in mind when you snap them, if you're not careful, you could strip the plant, and then that just sets everything back and defeats what you're trying to accomplish. So prune off any damaged leaves, any damaged stems, any diseased, and remove them. If they're dying, remove them. Now, don't just throw them down on the ground beside your plant. Remove them. Take them to your compost pile or dispose of them, but don't leave them in your garden. Tomatoes carry a lot of diseases. We don't want to cause that to multiply. And you can, once your tomato plant gets up and gets a good size, the bottom leaves down here that are below that first set of tomatoes. So your tomato plant will usually set that first set of tomatoes somewhere around 8 to 12 inches up. And so we can prune all those lower limbs off to help the tomato be able to produce those tomatoes, the plant do its job. And also I advise you on heirlooms especially to prune off any suckers that come out below that first truss of tomatoes. That way you can do what you're trying to accomplish, which is to focus your energy on producing fruit instead of just a big huge bush. Okay, 8. This is a personal preference for me, and this is harvest early. So we don't want to wait until the tomato is perfectly ripe, because when a tomato is flawlessly ripe, you probably have 1 day to eat it. The earlier you pick it, the more leadway you got to play. You can pick it even green. That's not my recommendation, though. You tend to really suffer the flavor when you pick them green. I like to pick them after they have blushed, and they'll usually blush on the bottom side. So blushing means they're turning colors. They're no longer green on the bottom. But I like to usually wait until they're a little past that blush stage. So I'm waiting most of the time so that the tomato is a quarter to half ripe, because it won't split as easily. And if it's going to rain and it's an outside tomato, get out there and pick them. Don't give it a chance to lose your crop, because once that tomato splits, it doesn't keep as long. You're going to need to bring it in. You're going to need to can it. You're going to need to make pasta sauce out of it, or you're going to need to eat it or give it to the neighbors to eat, because it's not going to last. So number 9 is support your tomatoes. By that we mean trellis. So you're either going to use a tomato cage, which is definitely not my recommendation unless you're buying some of these modern, really heavy duty, like square cages that are like 6 feet tall, because an indeterminate tomato, which is what most of our heirlooms are, not all, but most, an indeterminate tomato is just that. It's going to grow, if you got nutrients, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 feet during a year. And if you really feed it hard, it can even go more than that. But let's say 10 feet. 9-10 feet is about what you should expect. So those little bitty 4-foot tomato cages, they just crush under the weight of an indeterminate tomato. Now some of your small determinants will work in those heavy duty cages, but really those cages are more suited for growing peppers than they are suited for growing tomatoes. Don't fall for that. So when you trellis, there's a lot of ways to do it. We've got some videos on that also, but you can do an overhead system by using T-posts and conduit, or you can use stakes, old-fashioned tomato stakes. My problem with them is they're not quite tall enough, but you do what you got to do if that's all you got. And I don't recommend a Florida weave system for indeterminates. Determinates, that works great, but indeterminates I don't recommend. It can function, but it really ends up being a nuisance by the end of the year, and you're just kind of over it by the time you get done with your harvest. I like the overhead system with the T-posts and the conduit. It costs a lot of money to set up front, but you don't have to buy tomato stakes every year. Those T-posts will probably last your life more than likely. I have never had a T-post rust out. They only fail because you bend them. And then you can straighten them back out if you want to. But, you know, you're back them off the tractor, they bend. Okay, so number 10 is spacing. Let's talk about spacing on our tomatoes. If we're planting in the field, we're planting heirloom indeterminate plants. Let's give them 2 to 3 foot spacing. 2 foot is definitely the closest you want to go in the field if you're not going to prune them to a single or double leader. So 2 foot's the tightest. 3 foot gives you a little more room to work. Some people will argue for 4 feet. I think 3 foot's a good number. 2.5, 30, 32 inches is a real good number to work with also. And that's my preference. But a lot of times I do go 2 feet just so I can squeeze in some more tomatoes and work a little harder to get it. And then spacing between your rows, it really depends on you, but I would say give your outdoor tomatoes somewhere between 4 to 5 feet between the tomato plants. That way they got adequate ventilation to flow and you got room to get there and harvest. Okay, this one's a bonus. That was our number 10. So this is our bonus. And this is more about keeping your enthusiasm up. Grow a tomato that makes you smile. Grow a tomato that when you see it starting to ripen, it makes your heart skip a beat. Grow a tomato that when you slice it and put it on your BLT, you start watering at the mouth and you're drooling and you just can't wait to get that bite. You're waiting on the bacon to get done. You're waiting, you just look at this tomato and you're just like, wow. Get a tomato that when it sits on the counter, you don't walk by it and go, I'm not really in the mood. When you walk by it, you go, how can I eat that tomato today? So grow one that makes you smile. Grow one that makes your life better. Tiffany shared with you her favorites. I shared with you some of my favorites. And I'm going to give you one more bonus. Mortgage lifter. Mortgage lifter is a little more basic of a tomato, but it's a great tasting heirloom that's got a good production on it, and it's just great. So try mortgage lifter this year. If you add one old heirloom, add mortgage lifter. But then grow something fun. Grow orange accordion. Grow the pink Berkeley tie-dye, the green Berkeley tie-dye. Grow orange jazz or pink jazz. We'll warn you on those two. They do succumb to disease a little easier than some of the other varieties in our area, but you may not have the disease pressure we do here in East Tennessee. We get a lot of blight. And then grow you a variety like West Virginia 17B, Mountain Merit maybe is the name. But grow you a variety like that that's got some disease resistant built into it so that you'll have security in your crop. Anyway, guys, that's it. Like and subscribe. We got more videos coming in the future. Share this with friends and family. And hey, comment below and tell me what your favorite tomato is. Thank you very much. See ya.